So let's start. So good afternoon, everyone. No? So last meeting we discussed the many things. No, we discussed the programming assignment for PDP-1. Okay, and then I've shown you a factorial program with loop in the PDP-1. Okay, you can use this, or you can use another one, which is the sum and average with loop for the IAS. No, do you follow? You can convert that program into the PDP-1 language. We have found out that the PDP-1 is a much easier computer to program. Why is that? Because it uses a uniform data size and instruction size. No, 18-bit. So both instructions and data are of the same size. No, so if you look at the loop factorial that we discussed last meeting, so it is a simple program with addresses linearly assigned, no, or arranged. No, you don't have to specify left and right because they precede each other sequentially according to the address. Do you follow? No, so and there are very slight differences. Now, when you say LAC, we mean load accumulator, and in the IAS we say load M1. Here we say LAC1. Okay, sub M2 in the PDP-1 we say sub 2, and store 3 in the IAS. Now, I think that's also in the IBM 701, but here we say DAC3, deposit accumulator. No? All the rest are almost the same, like mul and sub. No, and then there's a skip. Okay, a skip command which says SZA, which means skip on 0 accumulator, which means that if the accumulator is 0, it will skip one instruction. Okay, so it's a way to create an if then else. No, why is that? Why is it like that? Why just one instruction? Because sometimes it's much easier to transfer a routine, no, a group of instructions into a separate portion in your program, so that that's the predecessor of structured programming, where we organize our program into sets of functions. No, in those days, functions are called subroutines. Do you follow? So that's why that's the direction. No? Arranging your program into subroutines, and eventually, no, there are far calls, long jumps, and others that will make you structure your program like they're really functions. No, because long jumps are those jumps which can return to where they jump. Do you follow? No, or far calls as they call it. No, do you follow? Now I've also have shown you the chronology of DEC. And I've shown you, I've told you a story regarding the patent of the stored program concept, which was never applied for by the author, whoever the author is. But the recognized author of the stored program concept is John von Neumann, no, from Princeton College. And we have learned that he was initially working also with EDVAC, but he later went out of the team. No? However, he described, no, the stored program concept in the manuscript called the first draft report on EDVAC, no, which was released in there's a story 1946, no, when people about 1946, no, when Mauchly and Eckert are working on EDVAC. Now it was found out later that initially he was part of the team. It was Eckert and Mauchly who were in charge of the physical aspect, no, the electronic aspect of the computer, and John von Neumann working on the design, where he was able to define, no, or describe in detail the structure of a stored program concept. No? So that's why nowadays John von Neumann is credited to be the author of the stored program concept. But the patent was not awarded to him because he did not apply for it. Eckert and Mauchly applied for a patent, but was later cancelled. No, and it was later found out that the first electronic computer invention was credited to John Vincent Atanasoff. No, 1940, 1930s. No, let's look at, anyway, we'll look at that, no, later. No, okay, and there's a link in our site regarding the John Vincent Atanasoff. No, okay. the ABC computer, no? Or you can Google that anytime, no? So you can learn the story why there was no patent for the stored program concept. And it was a sad story, no? Because there was plagiarism involved, no? So many of the concepts of the ABC computer were just copied into ENIAC and even EDVAC. Okay. However, no, without the patent, manufacturers were able to freely manufacture and sell stored program computers even until today. No, even Apple, no, IBM, and the most prominent companies during the time were IBM and DEC. IBM being a giant already at that time because they were selling several machines, no, calculators and many others, no, and even recording machines. They already have a card punch reader and writer. By 1953, IBM, right after the release of the IAS, created their own, okay, stored program computer, the 701. Okay, so it's almost like a copy, except that there are subtle differences, no? So IBM is 36 by 18, IAS is 40 by 18, by 20. Okay, so 36-bit data and 18-bit instructions. Okay, and yeah, it continued to create or manufacture and sell a very expensive mainframes, no? Do you follow? Okay, these are the first, in fact, the first generation of computers, which are electronic computers, are those mostly made by IBM. No? By the 1960s, no, the transistor was already introduced, no, so that IBM released a transistorized supercomputer. At the same time, DEC released their first PDP-1 and so on and so forth. So that's why you have the DEC PDP-1 programming language, which I have just shown you last meeting, and you're supposed to have an assignment on that. Okay, so by 1963, no, there's a third, transistorized ito by 1963, no, a new generation is coming. No, it's called the generation of the microcomputers, no, during the late 60s. Ito 1965, 66, no, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I have a link there describing the first generation of computers. So the first generation of computers are those manufactured from roughly, no, 1940 to 1956 during the Second World War. So you know this to be IBM Mark I, ENIAC, no? The ABC computer was before 1940, no? I think, no? Then ENIAC, first generation, they're mostly made of vacuum tube diodes. No? EDVAC, UNIVAC, okay, to 1956, no? So remember, Fortran was introduced in IBM 709 ba? 704. Okay, let's look at that, no? 709, okay? In the IBM 709, okay? Which was what? I'm sorry. What date? 1958, late 1950s, no? Ito. Okay. And during the early 1950s, no, IBM has no competition. They manufactured very expensive computers, 701, 704, and 709. Okay. Now, the second generation of computers are considered to be within 1956 to 1963. These are transistor based. Now, let's look at a transistor. Okay. So this is a transistor, no? It has a gate, emitter, and collector. Three, ano. Now, this is just an electronic switch, okay, which are used to replace, no, manual relays. They were previously called relays, no. Now, imagine the difference between a solid state transistor and a vacuum tube diode. Even a William tube, which is small, is much bigger than a transistor. So, several transistors can be used to create simple memories, registers, gates, no, and so on and so forth. That's why, no, they can be used to build computers, no, transistors, not just transistor radios. Do you follow? Remember that transistor was invented in 1948, okay, in the Bell Labs, no. Now it's now called AT&T, no, 1948. So by 1956, the transistor is already very common. You already have the transistor radio, transistorized TVs, no? Any questions so far?
Sir,
Yes.
Sir, naka-screen share po.
Come again?
wala na,
Screen share po, sir.
naka-screen.
Hindi po siya naka-screen share.
Hindi pala naka-screen share. I'm sorry, no? I'm sorry, no? Nawala. I've shared it already, right? Na-share ko na ito kanina because I checked the attendance anyway, no? Maybe I have made a mistake, no? I pressed the wrong key. I'm sorry, no? So anyway, the first generation was the generation of Eckert and Mockley, no? And then Jan van Neumann, okay? Do you follow? And then, of course, there was the IBM 701 to 709, no? First generation of computers. No, I'm sorry, no, nawala yung aking ano. So ito, the first generation. The second generation was the generation of transistors. Okay, here's a transistor, okay? It's much smaller than a vacuum tube. Okay. So they have reduced the size, no? They have reduced the size. This is invented in 1950. This was released in 1948. Okay. 1948 and was used in computers, no? By the early 1960s. Okay. So that the second generation of computers is considered to be 1956 to 1963. Okay. So dito yung during 1959 COBOL was ano for the 1794. Do you follow? IBM 1794. And DEC was born in 1959 with the PDP-1. And you have the first game called the Space War. This is the first computer with a cathode ray tube or CRT display. Okay? Do you follow? So ito yung ating ano no. Do you follow? So by this time, no, 1951 to 1958, these are now 709 is the last, okay, vacuum tube diode, no, a vacuum tube computer that was released by IBM. Okay, by 1959, 1956, no, it's already the second generation of computers, no, transistorized, no, which means they are made of transistors. Okay, so these are the popular computers, no? You have DEC PDP-1. No? In 1962, Sony, which was already there, was inventing, no? What is Sony inventing or producing during those times? They were inventing TV or manufacturing TVs, television sets, no? Okay. 1962 is a second version, no? 1962, but in my, it's, yeah, 1962 PDP-4. Is that correct? Yeah, 18-bit machine. Okay, do you follow? And then by then, 790, 794, 790, 740 were the IBM computers, no, which are transistor versions, no, of the 709. Okay, do you follow? So these are the second generation of computers. So itong 1794, these are the second generation of computers. Okay. Now, the third generation is from, saan yung aking third generation? Okay. Fourth na ito. We have a third generation. No? IC based. No? Dapat dito. Bakit wala, no? 1964 to 1971. I lost the content here. Let's just Google that, no? So IC. (1965 to 1971). Anyway, tutorials point is a good ano, no? Okay. So IC based. This is the time of the personal computers, no? 1965 to 1971. Okay. I'm not sure how this is, no? But it started with the IBM 360. It's not yet the IBM PC, no? If you look at our source, no? S360, these are already IC based, no? IC based. and the PDP-6. Okay, and until 1971, the S360 are IC-based computers. Now, an IC or an integrated circuit is a collection of transistors. No, you can build 100 to 1,000 transistors. No, 100 to 1,000 transistors inside an IC. Sorry, Ulyawan is here. Okay, it's okay now. So it made the physical size of electronic devices much smaller than the transistor. Let's look at for an IC. IC stands for integrated circuit. So ganito, no? Now in fact, several AND gates, these are gates, no? Can be stored inside an IC. Okay, so many transistors, and a gate can have about 4 or 5 transistors, no? And then a gate can be what, 5 gates, 4 to 5 gates can be stored in an IC like this. So 4 times of, shall we say 4 times 5, you'll have 20 transistors inside. No, you can have 20 transistors in an integrated circuit. Do you follow? No. So IBM 360 is IBM 370. These are the 3rd generation of computers. I lost my I'll try to build it up again. I think it's here, no? Nandito pa rin siguro, no? Ito, no? I think it's here, no? I made the wrong, Anyway, nandito na lang, no? Okay. These are the 3rd generation of computers, particularly for IBM, and this is from 1961 to 72. Why is it? Why is it, no? Kasi ang sabi dito, this is 1965 to 1971. So magkaiba sila ng konti, no? But anyway, the most important part is the IC based, no? IC based characteristic of computers. No? This is not yet, no? This is IBM PC. Hindi pa ito 3rd generation. The IBM PC is a 4th generation computer. Okay? Any questions so far? So, I'm sorry, bakit no? Okay. The IBM P, the 4th generation is from 1970s. Now let me look up the because it's covering my Okay, let's just Google that. No, I don't know what's happening to my 4th generation computers are the generation of microprocessors. Sorry, no. All. This is the age 1971 to 1980. This is, remember, in 1976, no, Apple created its own version of the personal computer. So this 1971 to 1980, kasali na dito yung Apple at saka IBM PC. Do you follow? Included in our list are IBM PCs now. In the 4th generation, you will have microprocessors. Let's look for a microprocessor. A microprocessor is a large-scale IC. Now, unlike before, you can have several transistors in an IC. The whole CPU now can fit into one IC, large-scale LSI. No? Ito, do you follow? This is a very large scale. Iba ito na bago na ito, mga Pentium cage. In this, no, you have a microprocessor. This microprocessor like this is a large scale. So previously, the 8088 processor, which is one of the first processors in the IBM PC, can fit into this. Okay, what is inside the processor? You have the accumulator registers, you have the ALU, you have the program counter. The diagram of the PDP-1 can now fit into one IC. Do you follow? Unlike before, in the IC based or in the small scale ICs, no, a processor can fit into one motherboard. Now in the microprocessor era, which is the 4th generation, a microprocessor can just fit in an IC, and it's very easy to assemble and very easy to maintain. Do you follow? Do you follow? 1971 to 1980. What are the computers here? Okay. Of course, there's Apple. Apple is not here now, but we will have a history, a separate history for Apple. Okay. In 1959, the personal computer was already popular. Okay. The first IBM personal computer called home computers. No, was it already there? No. Anyway, I've looked this up. No, from Wiki. In 1968, HP produced calculators and TTL. No, transistor logic. These are ICs. No. Okay. So HP produced 9100B in 1968. Now, data point CTC, no? Data point is an old computer which runs the 8008. The 8008 is a CPU in an IC. Okay, this is the predecessor of the 8080. 8008 is it Intel? Hindi pa sinabi, no? 1970s if it was Intel, but the 8080 and the 8088 are Intel processors, no? Okay. HP in 1971 added features to their 1968 model of HP 9100, now which includes basic programming. Oh, okay. Basic programming. Now, BASIC was later manufactured or produced by Microsoft. No, the BASIC language was bought by Microsoft later. No, and they were the official company that sells BASIC programming language. No, the personal computer was first coined in 1968. No, by 9100. It's called a personal computer because it's like an appliance. No. So Intel 8008 is an Intel processor. Do you follow? It's an 8-bit CPU. It's much smaller than the 18-bit version of the DEC, no, PDP-1, with 14-bit addresses. So 14-bit is a large address. If you have 12-bit for 4096, a 13-bit is 8K and 16K, no? 14-bit can address 16K. That's right, no? 16 KB of memory. How did I know that? Because remember in the DEC PDP-1, we have a 12-bit address. No? 12 can store 4K. So 13, 8K times 2. Okay. And then, of course, 14 can store 16 KB of memory. You follow? So madali lang naman. We will study binary numbers and Boolean logic. No? So you will have a session on how to compute binary numbers quickly. No? Several sessions. No? Microcomputers, Micral-N. Okay, the first commercially available microprocessor-based computer in 1973. Remember 1976 yung Apple, no? Okay, so from 1971 to 1976, terminal-based mini computers, no, were popular. But when you say microcomputers, you only have one single terminal, no? They follow. Let's look up for the important, Altair 8800. No? This is by MITS, Micro Instruction and Telemetry Systems. Okay, Altair 8800. Let's look at that. No, that's one of the computers used as basis for creating the Apple personal computer. Ito. It's then an Altair computer, but it has a monitor and a keyboard. Do you follow? Okay. Where are we now? Don't know. In 1974, no, Toshiba, okay, produced a computer called SMP80/08, which used the Intel 8008 microprocessor. No? Let's look up for Intel 8008. It's much more different. That's what it is, no? This is Intel 8008. Now it looks different from your modern day Intel processor. It's the modern day is a very large scale integrated circuit where you have 4 sides. This one only uses 2 sides. Okay, so that's the Intel 8008, which is used to power the first microcomputers. Okay, so in 1977, the second generation of computers, no, are known as home computers were developed because 1976 yung Apple. Okay, the basic language, basic stands for beginners all purpose symbolic instruction code. Okay, in 1977 we look at the history of Microsoft, no, so that we'll get to know when basic was first officially produced. Apple was produced in 1976, and by 1979 the first worksheet, remember, no, what you now have Microsoft Excel, right? Okay, wala pong nakapresent. Who do you mean walang nakapresent? Galyawan? Galyawan is present. I've marked it already. So the first spreadsheet is called VisiCalc, which runs on the Apple II because Apple I was released in 1976. No. By 1981, after the 1981 release by IBM released their IBM PC in 1981, where the term personal computer was generally used to replace microcomputers. No, so later you do not call them microcomputers, but you call them personal computers. So the IBM PC was born. Okay, do you follow? This is during the 4th generation, no, microprocessors. Now we have 5th and 6th generation, very large scale ICs. Okay. Okay. So next week I'm going to give you a practice test. No. Any questions so far? This is the IBM PC. This is how it looks. Do you follow? I programmed this myself when I was in college. I was in college by 1983. So 81 ito na release. I programmed this myself, no, using BASIC. Okay. If you have something like this, you can keep this and sell it for a fortune. This is a legacy. This is an antique legacy, no? Especially a keyboard like this, tactile keyboard. No. Okay, this is very expensive. Okay, you need to be very rich to have something like this in the 1980s. Ateneo has about 5, less than 10 of this, no? So we have to take turns with our programming schedule because there's so many students, okay, working. Now there were also IBM clones which look like this and run the same systems, which are much cheaper. Do you follow? By then in 1980, we were able to program in BASIC and Pascal and COBOL, no? We were able to write programs like those. I have programmed Fortran myself, no? Fortran 4, one of the first that I've done. It's a very crude language, no? I like COBOL and Pascal and BASIC. My favorite languages then. Okay. Do you follow? Any questions? The Ateneo Computer Laboratory is in the 2nd floor of the Del Rosario Hall. We used to program there during the 1980s, no? Because the Del Rosario Hall was already there. I was in about 3rd year when it was and then these are the computers that we were working with. Okay. So anyway, any questions so far? You look at this, no? Ang daming material, no? Ang daming material doon sa You look at this, no? This is very important. Many people enjoy history of computing because history is easier to understand than architecture, no? So mas madaling and then it will present you, no, the evolution in a much simpler terms. Okay? Tapos na tayo dito. Let's look at okay. So that's the that's the birth of the IBM PC, the PC that you are now working with. No? Okay. Tingnan natin kasi yung mga laptops, yung mga ano, marami pa di ba? Apple tayo, no? 1976, no? The Apple computer. Okay. Began in 1976. The founders were Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. The same people who are working with your iOS, no? Cell phones. Okay. In 1976, they debuted the Apple I desktop computer that came as a single motherboard, no? Unlike the personal computers of that era. The first personal computer or microcomputer is Altair, no? 8008. Okay. And Apple was one of the commercially popular computers, which was released in 1976. So you'll have a keyboard. Let's look for an Apple one. Apple computer. Kasi there's Apple II and Apple later, no? There it is, no? That's a test version. This is the Apple computer. Okay, do you follow? No, it was very popular in games. This looks like the IBM PC. The main difference is the casing. Do you follow? No, do you follow? So I have also programmed this myself, no, because we already have Microsoft Basic running on Apple during those days. No? Okay, and it has a basic programming language that comes along with it. In fact, Apple also ran the first versions of DOS. No, it is not yet Microsoft DOS. Okay, do you follow? Okay, in 1981, Apple II was it said here Apple 19 later. No, Apple II was introduced later. It has now an integrated keyboard and case with expansion slots for attaching a floppy disk, which means you can attach a floppy drive. No, Apple III was released in 1980, but I was programming the Apple I, no, in 1983. 1 year before IBM released the personal computer. IBM released the personal computer in 1981. Okay, so ganito yung Apple, no? Wow, this is a Mac computer, no? This is a Mac computer. This is the first computer with a mouse. Do you follow? No? First computer with a mouse. Can we just first computer with mouse. It was already there, no? Before the Xerox, Palo Alto, 1973 anyway, no? Ito yung first mouse, no? It's also in our reference, no? This is how the first mouse looked like in the 1970s. And this is a 1984 mouse. And then this is the mouse of the Mac computer in 1984. Okay, one of the popular microcomputers with a mouse, the first few computers. In 1985, Steve Jobs was kicked out of of Apple, and he built his own company called the Next. But later, he was also hired back again. No? Okay, in 1997, Steve Jobs returned to Apple, and then he introduced what you now have, the Mac OS, the iPhone. Okay, do you follow? The predecessor, kasi they can no longer compete with the IBM PC, so they have created their own OS, no, in a mobile device. No? So this is if you have a computer like this before, you should be very rich. This is the MacBook, no, the first versions of the MacBook. Who has a MacBook? There are still Macintosh computers nowadays, right? Sir, nakakuha ng Apple computer ang Adu? Yes, Adu has Apple computers. I didn't have a picture programming on the Apple computers, okay? Nakakuha may Apple. And also IBM PCs, no? Versions like this, no? But there are not so many of them, no? Like this, no? I have programmed machine like this myself. It takes 2 people to carry this, and the hard disk is very expensive. Okay, run out. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I was in freshman by 1983, so these were the computers. By 1984 and 85, we already have these computers. We don't have hard disks. Not all of them have hard disks. We have a 10 MB hard disk and a 1 kilobyte memory. Okay, and imagine that 10 MB. We only program in BASIC anyway, no? So very small programs. Okay. Ito yung the early years of Apple. Okay, so Apple was released first before the IBM PC. Okay, any questions? We'll just go through this now, and then if we are not finished, you just go with this yourself. Let's look at the history of the monitor, because remember that not all computers during the early days have monitors. Okay. This was, remember, the first computer. This is wrong, no? Uniscope 300, because by 1959 CRT was already working with the PDP-1. The first computer with an official CRT display is the PDP-1 by 1959 and 1960. Okay. The touchscreen technology was already invented in 1965. Now in 1973, we have the monochrome display, the black and white thing that you see, no? Okay. So mali itong 1964, because in 1960, the PDP-1 already has a CRT, even with a game running on that, no? So video output was first introduced. S-video, no, it's not yet the VGA. No, a video has a different coaxial plug. No? So it's different from the VGA. And the first computer with a video output is the Apple I. Okay, this is 1976. Now, the first computer with a video output. So 1977, the LED was invented. It was not yet used for screens, no? It was used for other things, no? So the first color monitor is the Apple II. Okay, released in 1977, a color CRT monitor. Let's look at that. No? Can we Google that? First computer with a color monitor, Apple II ba? I think it's Apple II, no? It's, yes, Apple II, 1977. I didn't enjoy that, no, because a color monitor is very expensive, no, during those days, no. So the first computer with a color monitor is in 1977. It's the Apple II. Okay. And the first computer, of course, to have a VGA monitor was IBM in 1987. VGA na yung monitor. Okay. In 1989, you have SVGA. It's a super VGA. What's the initial resolution of VGA? When you say SVGA, this is a VGA with a higher resolution. 800, 640 by 480. Do you follow? Okay. And then SVGA is 800 by 600. Okay. We're happy with that already, no? You have 800. Nowadays, you have 4K. So 600, it's more than, it's almost 10 times, no? The resolution. So 1024 by 768 by the 1980s. This is the standard resolution of the VGA during that time, no? 1024 by 768. You can already watch movies, no? And Windows can already run there. Okay. So 1995, the LCD monitor. Okay, and then 1997, ViewSonic was there. Okay. Better quality LEDs, LCDs pa, no? 2003, yung mga ano, LCD monitors are still popular. The LEDs came in 2009. 2009 ba? Yes, the LEDs, no? Okay. Now we have full HD. We have Ultra HD, by the way, no? 20 to 22-inch monitors in 2017, less than $5,000, $500. How much is that? $1,000. No, yes, but they're much cheaper now. You can buy. I bought mine at 3,500 pesos. About $8. $8 ba? Kasi 10 times 5, $100 is 5,000. Yeah, $80. No, do you follow? No? So the first computer with a VGA monitor is 1987. Okay. First color monitor is the Apple II. Okay. In 1977. Okay. So anyway, wala naman tayo masyadong details ngayon, no? We're just telling stories, finishing the history. Okay. Now let's look at the history of IBM PC. They come in two parts, no? Okay. Now tomorrow will be the start of the college days. I think college fiesta ba? So tomorrow there will be no classes. We will have no sessions, no? It was requested by my other students because they will have sports activities. I was informed. No? Oh, I'm sorry about that. Ito. Anong nangyari, no? September 1975, the company introduced the first 5100. Remember, IBM was producing large mainframes, no? Before 1975, there was the S360 and S370. Technically, the first IBM PC was not a microcomputer because maybe it was still transistor based, no? Okay. Where it's priced and it's promoted, no? The former started the 5100 is sold at $10,000. That's still very expensive. Why? Because Apple is selling its PCs at $600, no? 5100 during 1975. Okay, these are not considered microcomputers yet. Okay, so this is how the IBM PC look like. IBM 5150 microcomputers, no? Okay, so the first official was in 1978 called System 23 Data Master. Is this how it look? Now this is an Atari machine, no? Which was also a producer of microprocessors during those times. Atari 400 and 800 made proposals to IBM in 1980. Okay, to create small systems to compete with Apple because Apple was already producing the Apple II by 1980, no? Nandito na ito si Bill Gates, 1984. Okay. 1980, no? Because Basic was bought by Microsoft, and then IBM would like to buy Basic from Microsoft, but we did not push through. Okay. Okay. So Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, they were the founders of Microsoft at age 29 in 1984. Okay. Steve, they were programming BASIC. Okay. So this was in 1984. Okay. Triumph of the nerds. Why? Because the IBM PC was released with with a basic programming language. No. Okay. So the hardware was produced by IBM, and the programming language which comes along on an IC also was made by Microsoft. No, 1984. That's the official birth year of the IBM PC. 1984. The IBM PC with a basic programming language. Okay. Now there's a part 2. I think this is the longer one. Ito na. The start of the DOS. Okay. The start of DOS. No. Originally, DOS was not original from Microsoft. No. Do you follow? Because IBM was the first producer of a disk operating system. So this is the processor already, the 8086 by 1979. Okay. And IBM PC was produced in 1984. Now, these were the okay. This is the first operating system. No, it's called CP/M, which runs on an Apple lookalike. No, CP/M also runs on Apple. No? The Apple computers run on an operating system called CP/M. No? What does CP/M stand for? I forgot this already. No? PERT CP/M. That's the name of our operating system on a disk. Okay. The CP/M is the operating system which runs on the 8080 and the 8088. Okay. Let's Google for the first operating system. DOS, no? And for the IBM PC. For the IBM PC. CP/M, okay? In the 1980s, CP/M is the disk loading operating system. Okay? It didn't say which one is first, no? But I think CP/M is the original operating system that first ran on the Apple and IBM. Okay? What does CP/M mean? Find that out, no? Okay. Maybe GEOS is a second name for CP/M. Okay. The first operating system to run on the PC is called the CP/M. It's not owned by Microsoft. I don't know who owns it, no? But you find that out, okay? Tapos na tayo dito, no? Okay. 1980, no? That's the first official CP/M, ano? Okay. On the Digital Research 8086 version. So in April, Tim Patterson basic an operating system called QDOS. Okay. So because the CP/M did not succeed by 1980, Tim Patterson, no, of a company called SCP, made an operating system for the IBM PC, the 8086 or 8088. We called it QDOS, Quick and Dirty Operating System. Okay. 1980 pa ito, no? Remember 1984 na release ang full operating system ng IBM PC. But during 1980s, there were already Apples that were running CP/M. Okay? Apple computers were running CP/M. You have a boot disk, right? And you will have a C prompt. Okay? Now, September 30, when is that? 1980? Okay. Steve Ballmer, Bill Gates, Ballmer, and Bob O'Rear. They're the first employees of Microsoft. Okay. Microsoft took the responsibility of providing an operating system for the IBM PC. It's called MS-DOS. Do you follow? No? Including languages, BASIC, COBOL, and Fortran. Okay. That's 1980. IBM paid Microsoft $700,000 to port all the systems that they have to run on MS-DOS. Okay. There's Bill Gates in 1984. There's another story, no? Because IBM, Bill Gates, okay, went out to sell their own operating system, but it was originally made by IBM, the 86-DOS, no? 1987, no? There they are, no? 86-DOS, so which means they released the DOS in 1986. Paul Allen and Bill Gates. 86-DOS. $25,000. That's the grand total of the IBM PC with hardware and software with an operating system from Microsoft. There's a license agreement between IBM and Microsoft where IBM sells the hardware and Microsoft sells the software. Okay, can you go through this now yourself? Okay, the history. Next meeting we will study the history of the internet. Okay, anyway, we'll cut our our session short today. No, you read this. No, this will be included in our test. No, do you follow?
Yes, sir.
Okay, you read this. These are simple stories which will entertain you, no, during your vacant times, no. Okay, by next week I'm going to give you a practice test because that's the third week already, and then we will have our first formative test by the last week of August. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, next meeting is Monday. The 20th is a holiday, so it doesn't affect us, no. So I think we will have regular meetings next week. So baka dito na tayo, no, sa last week. Kasi mag-practice test tayo dito. Dito na tayo. Maybe 30 or the first week of September. We'll have our first formative test. Any questions so far? No?
None, sir.
Okay, see you next meeting, everyone. Yung previous good na test, preparatory assessment, yun sila, sir, practice test. Practice test din yun, no? What do you mean preparatory assignment? Is kanakan? Previous preparatory, ano? Where is that? Wala pa tayong ano, this isn't hidden yet. Okay. Do we have a practice test already? Wala pa, I have removed the practice test, okay? The assignments are programming assignments, no? Do you follow? There's no practice test yet. I'm going to give you the practice test next week, okay? Okay. Does that answer your question? Kanakan? Maybe there are tests, no, that are to follow, but they belong to a different set of topics, no? Ibang topics na yon, okay? Any questions so far? Any other question? Okay, so goodbye everyone. Thanks for coming. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Dumandan is present. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Dumandan. Anyone else? Okay. So goodbye everyone. Okay. Thank you.
Bye, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you.